Hello, everyone. My name is Elara. I want to tell you my own story. The story about my days in Aethelgard, the small town by the sea where I was born and grew up. The sea wind here, always carries a salty smell and a bit of cold, just like how life sometimes treats me. Our small town sits under tall rocks, like it's trying to hide from the sea of mist that covers it all year. And on the rocky point by the sea stands the old lighthouse, my quiet friend. It has been there for a very long time, seeing many ups and downs of Aethelgard, and it still shines its steady light through the night. Aethelgard is my home, even though life here has never been easy. Most people live by the sea, from the big catches of fish or the old boats that need fixing. We all know each other well, from the cry of a new baby to the last breath of an old person. But even in this quiet place, there is always a line separating the people who have a lot of things and people like me who have to worry about each meal. After that sad night, when the angry sea took away the people I loved most, I became the one who takes care of my family. My younger brother, Finn, was only 10 years old then, a boy with bright eyes and a kind heart, but he had a bad sickness called asthma. Every time the asthma came, his small chest would get tight, and hearing his hard breathing would break my heart. I worked very hard at the boatyard, my hands slowly becoming rough from the wood and paint. Every small coin I earned was very important. I saved every bit to buy food, clothes, and most importantly, medicine for Finn. But the medicine he needed kept getting more expensive, more than a young girl like me could afford. During the long nights, I stayed awake by his bed, hearing his painful cough, watching his big eyes try to find each breath. I knew I had to do something. No matter what I had to give up, I had to save my little brother. In my sadness, my eyes looked without thinking towards the big house of Lord Valerius Thorn, the richest and most powerful man in Aethelgard, the one who owned almost everything in this town. A thought suddenly came into my head, carrying a little bit of weak hope, but also filled with the deepest sadness. Finn's cough became more frequent and stronger. His breathing was shallow and fast, and his small body would shake with each painful gasp. The doctor said he needed a special kind of medicine, one that was very expensive, more money than I had ever seen in my life. I worked every day at the boatyard, my hands raw and tired, but the little money I earned was barely enough for food, let alone this costly cure. Despair began to creep into my heart, a cold and heavy feeling that made it hard to even breathe myself. I felt so helpless, watching my little brother struggle for air, knowing I couldn't give him what he needed. In my desperation, a thought, sharp and unwelcome, entered my mind. Lord Valerius Thorn. He was the richest man in Aethelgard, his wealth stretching further than I could imagine. He owned most of the land and businesses in our small town. Everyone knew he was a hard and unkind man, someone who always took what he wanted. The idea of asking him for help made my stomach churn with fear and disgust, but Finn's pale face and weak breaths pushed me. I had to try. For Finn, I would face even Lord Thorn. His house was a grand, imposing building, much bigger and fancier than any other in Aethelgard. As I stood at the large wooden door, my heart pounded in my chest like a trapped bird. A servant, with a cold look in his eyes, finally opened it. I asked to see Lord Thorn. He led me through long, dark hallways filled with expensive things I had only ever dreamed of. Lord Thorn was sitting in a large room, behind a heavy wooden desk. His eyes were sharp and cold. As he looked at me, I felt small and afraid under his gaze. I told him about Finn, about his sickness and the expensive medicine. I swallowed my pride and asked for his help, for a loan. He listened without saying a word, his face unreadable. When I finished, a slow, cruel smile spread across his lips. "I might be able to help you, Elara," he said, his voice smooth, but sending a shiver down my spine. "But my help comes at a price." My hope flickered. Anything, my lord, I whispered, my voice trembling. I will work harder. I will pay you back every penny. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes like dark stones. I don't need your coins, Elara. I have plenty of those. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. What I want is you. Marry me, Elara, and the medicine for your brother will be yours. His words hit me like a physical blow. Marry him. A man so old, so cold, so unlike anyone I could ever love. The thought filled me with horror. But then I saw Finn's weak face in my mind, his struggle to breathe. My heart tore in two. It was an impossible choice. My freedom for his life. Tears welled up in my eyes. I looked down at my hands, twisting them nervously. The silence in the room felt heavy, pressing down on me. Finally, in a small broken voice, I said, "Yes, my lord, I will marry you." The cruel smile on his face widened. He nodded. "Good. A wise decision, Elara. The medicine will be delivered to your house tomorrow." I left his house feeling numb. I had saved Finn, but I had also sold myself. A heavy sadness settled in my heart, a darkness that seemed to swallow all the light. I didn't know how I would live with this choice, but for Finn, I had to try. The next day, just as Lord Thorn promised, the medicine for Finn arrived. Seeing the small bottle filled with the precious liquid brought a wave of relief, but it was quickly followed by a bitter taste of what I had agreed to. Finn started taking the medicine, and slowly, thankfully, his breathing became easier. The terrible cough lessened, and the color returned to his pale cheeks. Watching him smile again was the only light in my darkening world. Lord Thorn began to visit our small cottage more often. His presence filled the small space with a coldness that even the warm fire couldn't chase away. He would talk about our future, about the grand house I would live in as his wife, about the expensive clothes I would wear. His words felt like chains, binding me to a future I dreaded. I tried to be polite, to answer his questions, but inside, my heart was screaming. The thought of marrying him became a heavy weight on my chest. I couldn't imagine spending my life with such a man, someone who saw me as nothing more than a possession. I started to think about the money he had given me. It was a loan, he had said. Maybe, just maybe, if I worked hard enough, if I saved every single coin, I could pay him back. The idea sparked a tiny flame of hope within me. It was a long shot, a very difficult task, but the thought of freedom, of not having to go through with the marriage, gave me a little strength. I started working even harder at the boatyard, taking on extra shifts, any job I could find. My hands became even more calloused, my body ached with exhaustion. But the image of Finn, healthy and happy, and the faint possibility of buying back my freedom, kept me going. One evening, as I was walking home, tired and lost in my thoughts, I saw a light coming from the old lighthouse. It was unusual. The lighthouse keeper, an old man named Silas, usually went to bed early. Curiosity pulled me towards it. The heavy wooden door was slightly open, and I could hear voices inside. Hesitantly, I pushed the door open a little more and peeked in. It wasn't Silas. Standing near the lamp, his back to me, was a man I had never seen before. He was tall and had a quiet way about him. Silas was sitting at a small table, talking to him in a low voice. I almost turned to leave, not wanting to intrude. But then the stranger turned, and his eyes met mine. They were kind eyes, filled with a gentle understanding that surprised me. He smiled a small, warm smile. "Hello," he said, his voice calm and soothing. "I am Kalen, and you must be Elara." I was surprised he knew my name. Silas must have told him. I mumbled a greeting, feeling awkward. Kalen gestured towards a stool. "Please, come in. It's cold outside." I hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The air in the lighthouse smelled heavily of oil and sea, but it felt strangely pleasantly warm. Kalen introduced himself properly. He was the new lighthouse keeper, he explained. coming to replace Silas, who had grown too old to work. He seemed different from the others in Aethelgard, quieter, more thoughtful. Over the next few weeks, I found myself drawn to the lighthouse. Sometimes, after a long day at the boatyard, I would walk up the winding stairs to talk to Kalen. He was a good listener, and he never judged me. I found myself telling him about Finn, about my worries, and even about the terrible agreement I had made with Lord Thorn. Kalen listened patiently, his kind eyes full of sympathy. He didn't offer easy answers, but he offered something even better, understanding and a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. He told me stories of the sea, of the stars, and about the healing power of nature. He showed me different herbs that grew wild near the coast, explaining their uses. One of them, he said, could help Finn breathe easier during his bad days. As I spent more time with Kalen, a different kind of feeling began to grow in my heart. It wasn't the fear and dread I felt whenever Lord Thorn was near. It was something warm and gentle, like the steady beam of the lighthouse cutting through the darkness. For the first time since my parents were gone, I felt a glimmer of hope, a feeling that maybe, despite everything, I wasn't entirely alone. As the days turned into weeks, Lord Thorn's visits became more frequent and his demands more insistent. He started talking about setting a date for the wedding, his cold eyes watching me closely, making sure I didn't try to back out of our agreement. The thought of becoming his wife filled me with a growing sense of panic. I felt like a bird trapped in a cage, the door slowly closing. I continued to work tirelessly, saving every coin I could, but the amount I owed Lord Thorn felt like a mountain, impossible to climb. The small flame of hope I had felt began to flicker and threaten to go out. My visits to the lighthouse became my only source of comfort. Kalen's quiet strength and gentle understanding were like a balm to my wounded spirit. He never pushed me to talk about Lord Thorn, but he was always there to listen when I needed to. He taught me more about the herbs he had shown me, and the remedies he suggested did seem to help Finn breathe a little easier. In his presence, surrounded by the steady glow of the lighthouse lamp and the rhythmic crashing of the waves below, I felt a sense of peace I couldn't find anywhere else. One evening, as I was sharing my worries with Kalen, he looked at me with a serious expression. "Elara," he said softly, "this agreement with Lord Thorn, it doesn't feel right. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your happiness for this." "But what choice did I have?" I replied, my voice filled with despair. It was Finn's life or mine. Kalen was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "There might be another way," he said finally, his voice low. "Lord Thorn, he has a reputation in Aethelgard. People fear him because of his wealth and power. But I've heard whispers, rumors of things he has done to get what he wants. Unfair things." My heart quickened. "What kind of rumors?" I asked, leaning closer. Kalen hesitated, then spoke carefully. Stories of him forcing people off their land, of making deals that ruined families. Nothing concrete, just hushed voices and fearful glances. But where there's smoke, a new idea began to form in my mind. A risky one, but one that offered a glimmer of a different kind of hope. Maybe I didn't have to just accept my fate. Maybe there was a way to fight back. Over the next few weeks, Kalen and I started to listen more carefully to the whispers in the town. We talked to some of the older folks, the ones who remembered things from years ago. Slowly, piecing together fragments of conversations and veiled hints, a darker picture of Lord Thorn began to emerge. He wasn't just a wealthy businessman. He had used his power to manipulate and control the people of Aethelgard for a long time. We learned about families who had mysteriously lost their homes, about fishermen who had been forced out of business by unfair competition, all orchestrated by Lord Thorn. The more we uncovered, the more my anger grew. This man, who held my future in his hands, was not just unkind. He was cruel and unjust. Kalen, with his quiet determination, became my partner in this secret investigation. He used his position at the lighthouse, overlooking the town and the harbor, to observe and gather information. He had a way of listening patiently, of making people feel comfortable enough to share their stories. One stormy evening, an old fisherman, his face etched with years of hardship, came to the lighthouse seeking shelter. As the wind howled outside, he told us a story about how Lord Thorn had cheated him out of his fishing boats years ago, leaving his family with nothing. His voice trembled with anger and resentment. Listening to his story, something inside me snapped. I couldn't go through with this marriage. I couldn't let this man control my life, especially knowing the pain he had caused so many others. Kalen looked at me, his eyes filled with understanding and support. "What are we going to do?" I asked him, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Kalen looked out at the raging sea, the beam of the lighthouse cutting through the darkness. "We will show Aethelgard the truth, Elara," he said, his voice firm. "We will shine a light on his darkness." The night of the storm felt like the world was ending. The wind screamed, and the rain lashed against the lighthouse windows. It was the night Lord Thorn had planned for our wedding. But instead of preparing myself to become his wife, Kalen and I were putting our own plan into action. We had shared the stories we gathered with a few brave people in Aethelgard, families hurt by Thorn's greed. They were scared, but they were also tired of living in his shadow. Together, we decided to show everyone the truth. As the storm raged, we made our way to the center of town. The wind tried to push us back, but our determination was stronger. A few of the families Thorn had wronged joined us, their faces pale but their eyes firm. Lord Thorn was waiting at the small church, a smug look on his face. But when he saw us arrive, not just me, but a small crowd of angry villagers behind me, his smile faded. I stepped forward, my voice shaking at first, but growing stronger with each word. I told everyone about Finn, about my desperation, and about the terrible deal I had made with Thorn. Then the others spoke, one by one, sharing their own stories of how Thorn had cheated them, taken their homes, and ruined their lives. The villagers listened, their faces changing from confusion to shock, and then to anger. They had always been afraid of Thorn, but hearing the truth from their neighbors gave them courage. Thorn tried to deny everything, his face red with fury. He called us liars, tried to use his power to silence us. But it was too late. The truth was out, carried by the storm wind. In the middle of the chaos, Thorn tried to grab me, but Kalen stepped in front, his eyes calm but firm. "She is not yours to take," he said. Thorn lunged at Kalen, and a brief struggle followed. But the villagers, now united in their anger, stepped forward to help. Thorn, outnumbered and his lies exposed, finally realized he had lost. The next morning, the storm had passed, and a fragile sunlight broke through the clouds. Thorn was gone. The villagers, for the first time in a long time, felt a sense of hope. Finn was getting stronger every day, thanks to the medicine, and my heart, which had felt so heavy for so long, began to feel lighter. Kalen and I stayed in Aethelgard. The villagers, grateful for our help, treated us with kindness and respect. The old lighthouse, once a lonely place, became our home, filled with warmth and love. We watched the sea together, its moods changing like our own, and the steady beam of the light became a symbol of the hope we had found. Even in the darkest of storms, we had faced the darkness and found our own light together.